Okay, so yes, but I have to resituate myself so I can see everybody. There are people watching, and then there's a glare from the light. Okay, well, too bad for those who aren't here live. See the light shining on my head. So I don't have my makeup person here to put the stuff on. So, oh well. Like Steve Harvey, that's right. Yeah. So the topic tonight kind of slightly in flux because unfortunately statements keep being made and have been made the past few days that kind of call into question what it means to be an American Jew who happens to be loyal to Israel at the same time, and whether that's there's anything wrong with that. So before getting into the issue at hand with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota and her statements and AIPAC and all that, just want to step back a little bit and just say a couple comments about this. So, you know, I took for granted growing up, son of a rabbi, having gone to Jewish day school, that for most of my life, that it was just instinctive that that's just what it means to be Jewish in America, not just to that you're free to learn all about your religion and practice your religion, but that you can be a Zionist as well. Proudly learning that when the state of Israel was declared by David Ben-Gurion, President Truman was the first one to acknowledge that, to authorize and say, yes, we recognize the validity of the establishment of the state of Israel. And it's clear from my upbringing and from life as Jews in America in the past few decades that our place is secure and that we know that the American government supports Israel no matter what. So again, another statement I want to say is that I am not a professor. I am not up on all the facts and everything. The purpose of this class is to give general strokes, general brush strokes, and not to get into all the nitty-gritty. So I know that there have been presidents in the past who have not necessarily been 100% behind Israel. The Sinai campaign in 1956, people can call into question President Eisenhower. And in the Yom Kippur War, Golda Meir and others had to twist people's arms to get Nixon to agree to send arms to Israel to save Israel. So I understand that throughout Israel's 70-year history, that there hasn't been blanket 100% support all the time. I understand that. But again, looking at it from above and overview, Israel can count on the support of the United States government. And Rhea Sears will get into this in her talk on Shabbat in next week, March 16th, about U.S.-Israel partnership. So there's that. But we also know, there's that one issue about understanding that our place as American Jews is secure in our support of Israel, that we don't have to worry about anything about it. We don't have to worry about being accused of anything other than that it's just natural to support the state of Israel. And it helps that the Christian evangelicals are strongly in support of Israel as well. And so there are a lot more of them than there are of us in America. And prime ministers of Israel have gone above and beyond to show their gratitude to the leaders of the Christian evangelical movement in America for their support of Israel. So, and they have influence in the American political system. But then there's the other idea of anti-Semitism, and that our place as Jews in America may be, well, I speak for myself. I have personally never experienced anti-Semitism. Going to Jewish day school. One year I went to public school. That was seventh grade. Middle school isn't the best time for certain kids, and myself included. Not exactly the most popular of kids, and bringing my own lunch and not eating from the cafeteria because of keeping kosher. So other kids that I sat with called me the kosher kid, but it's not like it was anything anti-Semitic about it. It was just, at least I didn't understand it that way. So I didn't, but my parents, growing up in Philadelphia and going to public school there, did experience, anti-Semitic insults and things like that. And I'm sure us here, or those of us watching, can tell stories about incidents like that. So our place in America in terms of anti-Semitic attitudes is not as secure, but in relationship to Jews living in other countries around the world throughout our history, it's a piece of cake living here in America, and we don't know really, unless we're students of history, how good we really have it here. And so never a question since George Washington that we have freedom of religion. And when George Washington wrote a letter of thanks to the Jewish community of America for their support of him, and he guaranteed in his letter to bigotry no sanction, etc., freedom of religion for all. So the combination of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are sentiments that we are familiar with, but thank goodness have not had to deal with in a very, very serious way, as Jews in Europe have had to deal with and are dealing with at this very moment. And so then it comes as a shock when a statement or statements that a congresswoman can say about Jews and repeating tropes that have been in place for centuries about who we are as Jews, that we have influence in government, and that you have to watch out for what we. It's all about the Benjamins, baby, she wrote on Twitter, specifically citing AIPAC. That's her accusation about our influence that we have with AIPAC to prompt members of Congress to have no choice but to support Israel because of all the $100 bills, the Benjamins, that are flying in to the members of Congress coffers. But she also has said that she accused us of dual loyalty, and that's how we have to call into question the loyalty of Jews who are American, and whether they are completely loyal citizens of America when they are obviously, according to her, loyal to Israel as well. So I just want to break those down a little bit, talk about that a little bit, and please feel free to interrupt me at any time with a question or a comment. But and then we'll get into BDS in a little bit as well. But the question of dual loyalty, it should not be a question, because there are American citizens are allowed to be citizens of other countries, certain other countries. I don't know the whole list, but there are several other countries that Americans can be both citizens of America and citizens of another country at the same time. Okay, so yes, so it's a large majority, Joe is saying. So take your word for it. I know that it's a large majority of countries. The only thing is that if you're an American and an Israeli citizen at the same time, but you want to live in Israel, no, if you want to run for Knesset in Israel, if you want to run for office in Israel, then you have to give up your American citizenship. Okay, so and that could be the case. Vice versa, if you are a dual citizen and run for office in America, it's possible, I didn't check, that you have to give up your citizenship of other countries. That makes sense. So that if you're an elected official in America, so I'm not sure if that means locally, like to be on a school board. Can you be on a school board and also a citizen of Israel? Maybe that's different than being a member of Congress. So again, these are questions, but you can understand why that condition would be in force to ensure 100% loyalty to the country for which you serve. But in the country in which you live, it's another question. Why not? What's the problem? It only comes down to who you pay taxes to, where you're living, where all of that, not a problem. And there are a lot of American citizens who live in Israel who renew their citizenship and their passports at the American embassy in Israel. And when children are born to them in Israel, they register them at the American embassy so that their children are American citizens, etc. So we have this reciprocal arrangement. So it's not a problem for us to have that loyalty. Now that's you might question that idea. Wait a second. How can it might seem right for people to question us about our loyalty to America if we pray 3 times a day for someday returning to Israel, and for the temple to be rebuilt in Jerusalem, and for the kingdom of David and his descendants to rise again in Israel. So if you look in the prayer book, maybe if we're reading it in Hebrew, we're not paying so much attention to it. But if you read it in English, that's what we're saying 3 times a day when we pray. Okay, every single service has that in the Amida. That's what we're looking forward to. So you can understand that. So that when Napoleon, back in the day of the French Revolution, granted citizenship to all French people equally, he reserved judgment for the Jews, and it took them a while, and he called a Sanhedrin in the early 1800s. So French Revolution, 1789. It took 11 years until he called a Sanhedrin, a representative, and it's what he called it, of the Jewish community of France to answer a few questions about the Jewish community's loyalty to France. And that prompted the development of the Reform movement. So Reform Judaism really started in France as a response to Napoleon questioning Jewish loyalty to France. And the Reform movement said, no, we're going to cut out those prayers from the prayer book because we don't want people to question our loyalty. We want the French to understand that we are 100% French. And then when the Reform movement really sprouted in Germany, They said the same thing. We don't want people to question our loyalty to the German nation. We cut out these prayers. But since then, all other movements in Judaism have not cut those out. We understand that this is for some time in the future. It's not right now. So that's how you can answer about the prayers. And even with the state of Israel now, there's a sense that we can be loyal to two different places at the same time. And our loyalty to America should not be called into question, as Congresswoman Omar has, and others have as well. She's just voicing them. And so she also, the other thing I want to say about this is also there are movements in place no, let me say it this way. The Jewish community, as we know, is not a united Jewish community. No matter where the Jewish community is in the world, there is no one representative body that speaks for the entire Jewish community. And there are a variety of opinions that are out there that make up the Jewish community. So that there's a conference of presidents of American Jewish organizations, something like that. It's called something like that. There are 30 or so organizations represented by their presidents sitting on that conference and they think that they speak for the American Jewish community, but not. There's somebody who works for the ZOA who's a member of our congregation who's just about to walk in. So I was just going to say that there's a variety of opinions out there about support of Israel, from ZOA, which is as right as you can be and hawkish about support of Israel, to J Street, to a new organization called If Not Now. So by mentioning these organizations, I'm not saying that I support any one of them. I'm just saying that their positions, we can understand their position, and I understand their position. So that, for example, an organization that is as staunch in its support for Israel as the Zionist Organization of America, you can understand that. You want to be as staunchly supportive of Israel as possible, sometimes, no matter what, without question. But then at the same time, we do have to legitimately ask questions about how Israel can make peace and what's involved in Israel arriving at a peaceful negotiation with its neighbors. And so the question is, how far should Israel go? And how much of a say should we, people who do not live in Israel, have to say about that? It's one thing if we were living in Israel, serving in the army, or our children serving in the army, then without a doubt we have a right to voice an opinion about that, because we're potentially shedding blood, or our children are shedding blood for the country. But outside of Israel, we still have a right to voice an opinion about it, but we're not as wedded necessarily to it. And certainly we're not bleeding as much as if we were living there. And so it is, within Israel, there are different political parties that have a different points of view about how to make peace, or if to make peace with the Palestinians. And in America too, the Jewish community has that. So I just wanted to read what from the If Not Now. Have you heard of this organization, If Not Now? Let me read about it. So on their website, they say this in what is a section called About Us on their website. During the violence of Operation Protective Edge in 2014, do we know what that is? Operation Protective Edge was the most recent war with Gaza, right? So Protective Edge is what Israel named this war, in protecting Israel from the incoming missiles. So during the violence of Operation Protective Edge in 2014, young Jews, angered by the overwhelmingly hawkish response of American Jewish institutions, came together under the banner of "If Not Now" to demonstrate their resistance through the beauty of Jewish ritual. Okay, so that's what they say. So the hawkish response of American Jewish institutions. So that could be true. That could be, there certainly was some hawkish response to American, but again, was that the umbrella, the official response of the American Jewish community? Again, it's unclear that there's an official Jewish response to things like this. Okay, but that's their sense. Politically within, okay. Within our own Washington Jewish community, we have experienced this pushback of a sense of, you remember what is it called? The Theater J. That's right. Theater J was under the direction of Ari Roth for a number of years, and he, as an artist, was willing to put on productions, Jewish productions, that were quite provocative. But that's what art is supposed to be, right? What art is supposed to be. And so some of the plays that were there, what? 90%. Okay, so I'm just okay, but Joe, yeah. So I understand that this is, I am treading on very thin ice here, but I do want to I just want to be sure that as we have this presentation and discussion, that we want to think about this and with an open mind. Okay, so all I wanted to say is that it was specifically about one play that there was pushback from some in the Jewish community about the sponsorship of Theater J. That apparently I don't know all the ins and outs, but apparently Theater J or the DCJCC got money from the Jewish Federation of Washington to support its work. So it's one play called into question what happened in Israel in 1948 with how there's the accepted narrative that the indigenous Arab population were told by surrounding Arab countries, leave Israel because it'll only take us a little bit to defeat Israel, and then you can come back home. That was the accepted narrative, whereas there could be an alternative narrative that perhaps Israelis at the time forcibly evicted Arabs from their homes. And this play chose to highlight that narrative. And as a result, this one organization, which has a very long name, and it's still in existence, and I still get emails from them. So I don't remember the entire name, but it's something against support of art or something like that. Called into question the Federation's sponsorship of Theater J, and especially Ari Roth, and that we should boycott that play, whatever. It prompted Ari Roth to leave Theater J, and that the Theater J is under new direction, and that the plays that the Theater J does now might still be provocative on an artistic level, but certainly not provocative against the what is understood to be the general Jewish community attitude of pro-Israel. And so that what If Not Now is talking about is essentially that that idea from some in the community that their voice can't be heard because the voice that should be heard is the voice that supports Israel. It's the voice of AIPAC. It's the voice of that standard Jewish community line that we should support Israel because if we don't, who else will? Okay, again, I'm doing general brushstrokes here because we could do a course just about each one of these things and spend an hour or more on each one of these things. I just want to highlight what If Not Now was talking about, and they were moved to act by moral anguish and inspired by Hillel's 3 questions. What they're talking about is Rabbi Hillel from 2,000 years ago, who said in Hebrew, "Im ein ani li mili," v'im. No, the im lo akshav matai, but there's a middle statement. Yes, right. I know it in English, but I want it in Hebrew because it's poetic in Hebrew, and I can't, of course, with put on the spot. I'm not remembering it, and but I'll find it. Right. If I am not for myself, who am who will be for me? And when I am for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Oh, that's the literal translation of those 3 statements. So those are the 3 questions that Hillel asked that If Not Now is responding to. They lamented the loss of both Israeli and Palestinian life. They had 3 demands: stop the war on Gaza, end the occupation, and freedom and dignity for all. That's If Not Now. And then they, of course, as all organizations want to do, they want to get publicity. So they managed to get kids who are on birthright to leave birthright and do an alternative kind of field trip one day of birthright. And so, of course, birthright argued about that and how, if you commit to come on birthright, you got to stay with birthright. And If Not Now was trying to offer an alternative to that. So there's that voice of If Not Now trying to provide an alternative. And so on the face of it, again, on the face of it, not getting into the logistics of it on the ground, but on the face of it, you would think that the Jewish community should be open to a variety of expressions and opinion about what is the role of Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinians. How much of a voice should Palestinians, the average Palestinian citizen, have in terms of relationship with Israel and what Israel should do for them, etc. Okay, so we can understand that in theory that those are legitimate questions to have. Okay, I don't think anybody would argue that Central American people are rushing to our border. However we understand the politics of that, the fact is that Central Americans are rushing to our border, and therefore we have to do something about it. What we do about it and what we label it is different depending on our political view, but the fact is that they're there. Same thing in Israel. There are Palestinians there. We can't ignore them. The question is, what do we do in relating with them? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. No, wait, hold on. Yes. 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 Okay. So in case people watching didn't hear that, Ami is asking, am I referring to Palestinians who are Israeli citizens or Palestinians on the West Bank? And I'm saying yes, because they are a minority. The Arabs who are in Israel as citizens are a minority within Israel, and as such, all citizens of Israel need to feel as if they have a voice, just as all citizens of America need to feel that they have a voice. That's all I'm saying. I understand full well that these are loaded, explosive topics. I understand that. But everyone agrees, everyone should understand that these people exist and you can't ignore them. That's all I'm saying. What I'm not legitimizing, if not now. I'm not saying that we should support them. I am saying that what they are saying on their website perhaps is legitimate in raising that we should think about what we should do and how we should advocate on behalf of Palestinians and whether we should or not. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that it's something to be dealt with. BDS, on the other hand, is not so. BDS has been around, according to articles that I have read, since around 2005. The BDS movement, I had thought that it's around a lot longer than that, but apparently it's since 2005. So the boycott, divestment, sanction movement, according to this article from Vox, aims to force Israel to change its approach to the Palestinians through external pressure. BDS activists want companies to stop doing business in Israel, consumers to stop buying Israeli products, and academics and cultural figures to stop collaborating with Israeli colleagues. The movement's supporters bill it as the spiritual heirs of the boycotts targeting apartheid South Africa in the 1980s. Its opponents bill it as anti-Semitic campaign aimed at the destruction of Israel as a Jewish state. So there's not much I can do to say in favor, even in theory, about BDS, because what is clear to me from everybody who supports BDS is that they are supporters of BDS because they are anti-Israel. It's not because they are necessarily against all authoritarian governments as they see it, because there is no BDS against China. There is no BDS against North Korea. Well, there are. America has sanctions on North Korea, but so we do business with China, and the smartphones that we have wouldn't exist without China and business with China, right? It also wouldn't exist without chips in it from Israel, but they're made in China, right? So you don't have these same people marching outside Chinese embassies and consulates. You don't have these same people speaking up against visiting Chinese scholars who and academics who come to America or anything like that. These BDS supporters are actively against Israel, and they are totally anti-Israel. And there's nothing I can see in which I could say anything that could be misconstrued as support of BDS. Yeah, go ahead, Julian. No, well, Julian first, then I said Julian, not Joe, but Joe will be second. Yeah. What? Yes.
What is loyalty to Israel? If I
Ah.
don't like an if I don't support AIPAC, which I don't,
Uh-huh.
and I'm financially,
Right.
I believe in their ideas, I don't agree to everything that Netanyahu does,
Right.
does that make me disloyal to Israel?
Right. Okay. So Julian's asking a question. What does loyalty to Israel mean? If one does not support AIPAC, one does not like the policies of the Netanyahu government, does that mean that you're not loyal? So that's why I brought up the if not now as an example that in theory, again, I don't know everyone who supports if not now and whether they are really just find it as an excuse to make it look nicer to be just anti-Israel. I don't know that for sure, but in theory, the idea that there shouldn't be anything wrong with questioning support of Israel, whether it's because of the Israeli government. There should be a difference between support for Israel as Israel as the state versus supporting Netanyahu and Netanyahu's policy. I think that we can make that distinction, and we could all be supporters of Israel, whether we like Netanyahu or not. That shouldn't be a question. Yes, go ahead.
I'd be very interested to hear what you highlight that because they are not supporters of the government. They're in favor of a two-state.
I was going to get to AIPAC in a moment. Yes, yes.
When I hear American Jews who are coming at it from the left side, the actual doctrine differ by infinitesimal amounts.
Yeah.
They're both in favor of two-state solutions. They are not supporters and cheerleaders of the right wing in Israel.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right.
It's very interesting when I hear a person who is not in agreement with AIPAC, but actually for the reason they don't seem to gather with what I know AIPAC stands for.
Right. So there are these general impressions that we have and that the media fosters that we think are the true ideas behind these organizations. And so what I'm suggesting, Julian, is about loyalty is that I also don't like the Netanyahu government, not just about its policies towards trying to arrive at a peaceful solution with the Palestinians, but also as a conservative Jew, because of its Netanyahu's government and every government before that had the coalition made up of ultra-Orthodox parties in it, that those governments have always restricted my conservative movement approach to Jewish practice. So when Netanyahu promised that an egalitarian plaza would be built and prayer area would be built at the Kotel and then reneged on the promise, I can't stand Netanyahu for that. The deputy mayor of Jerusalem 2 days ago refused to attend an economic forum that was held at the building that has meeting space in it on the corner of King George and Agron Street, which, if we know that corner, we know that at one corner is the headquarters of United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism in Israel. And it has a guest house there with a dining room and lots of meeting facilities. So apparently, lots of organizations in Jerusalem rent out space for meetings there. And it turned out that the city of Jerusalem rented out space in the guest house of the conservative movement offices and for this economic forum when the deputy mayor of Jerusalem, who happens to be ultra-Orthodox, found out that he would have to be in that building. He refused to go. He was supposed to be the keynote speaker at this forum. Refuses to go to and give sanction what could be seen as condoning conservative and reform Jews who are trying to destroy Judaism. That's what he said. And when asked about it, well, what, any other place? I will not go anywhere near anything to do with the conservative and reform movement. This is the deputy mayor of Jerusalem. So I have my reasons not to be loyal to the Netanyahu government or any other government that has ultra-Orthodox in it. So, and I don't think that I could be accused of not being loyal to Israel. I just have my problems and issues with the government of Israel, and if so, here in America, what can I do about it? If I were living in Israel, I would try to do something about it. But my friends who have been living in Israel for decades still haven't been able to do anything about it. Joe. Yes. Yes, well, this is what this article describes them. A loose movement that dates back to roughly 2005 aims to force Israel to change its approach to the Palestinians through external pressure.
Many times that their goal not to end the occupation.
Right. To destroy Israel. Yeah, I understand. Right. Understand. So so people who claim that they support BDS because they support any movement that would be to bring down an authoritarian government, that argument is false because they're not involved in anti-China, which we should all be involved in because of how unhumanitarian China is, right? So you want to be consistent. If ideologically you are opposed to authoritarian regimes in the world because of the impact they have on the freedom and safety of people, then we should be opposed to lots of governments. But this one is only focusing on Israel. Okay, so yes, Ami. So okay, so let me. Right. Okay. So let me. So Ami is just saying something about AIPAC, and let me say this about AIPAC and what Dan had said before from the ZOA side of things. I told him that as I saw you coming in. But let me just say, Ami, let me just say this. Let me say this about American Israel Public Affairs Committee runs most famously its policy conference every year here in Washington, which now has close to 19,000 people attending it. And they claim that they are bipartisan. They do not, they're not Republican, Democrat. They are neutral when it comes to that. They're in agreement that everybody should support Israel. And they claim that they have the largest representation of members of Congress outside of the State of the Union address. So whether that's true or not, that's what they claim. So they have hundreds of members of Congress in attendance at the policy conference, and so I've been attending the policy conference for the past few years because, and I only go for one day of the 3 days because they have special sessions for rabbis on the second day, on the Monday of the conference. So on the third day, that's the advocacy day where they go on Capitol Hill and they claim that unlike the Jewish Disability Advocacy Day that I attended last week, where we would meet with staff members of congressmen in their offices and not the congressmen or congresswomen themselves, here for this advocacy, the congressmen or congresswomen themselves make themselves available when these 19,000 people come calling on their offices. So that's pretty impressive that members of Congress do support AIPAC. And I got an email that Senator Chuck Schumer has just been confirmed as a speaker, and Prime Minister Netanyahu is confirmed as a speaker. So what? If he's not in jail by then. Policy conference is the end of March, so yeah, there's still time. I don't know when his hearing is. So right. So there has to be a hearing for that, and I think that hearing hasn't happened yet. But what AIPAC does is try to convince members of Congress that they should support the security of Israel. Not necessarily the policies of Israeli government, but the security of Israel. And they bring bipartisan trips to Israel of members of Congress and their staff to see on the ground what's going on in Israel. Okay. And what it doesn't usually do, but what it did last week when Netanyahu announced that as he's running for re-election and who his proposed coalition partners were going to be, when he announced that he was taking on this party called Otzma Yehudit, which is Otzma Yehudit is the Jewish Power Party. They are the successors to Meir Kahana's party, his party Kach, which had, I'm going to talk about it in Shul on Shabbat, what their foundational principles are. It's clear that they are a racist party, and that AIPAC was not the first to come out in opposition to Netanyahu, but they did, supporting what AJC said, that there's no reason for, and we should not be supportive in any way of Netanyahu having a right-wing, such a racist political party in his government. So usually AIPAC doesn't make statements like that. It's all about supporting and making sure that Congress supports the security of the state of Israel. So it's basically a rah-rah kind of conference to have 18,000, 19,000 people all there, most of them Jewish. As I understand, 2/3 of the people in attendance are Jewish. There are lots of others who attend, because I heard at a parlor meeting last night that they reach out to the Latino community in America, and they have someone in their office whose job it is to reach out to Latinos in America. They reach out to the African American community as well. So, and they are in attendance at AIPAC too. So, yes. And of course, yes, anybody who supports Israel is welcome to the AIPAC conference. So, this discursive talk then, I just wanted to raise some ideas about what it means to have dual loyalty and why anybody should call that into question, and that we should at the same time understand that there are a variety of opinions that should be listened to and are valid when it comes to raising questions about Israeli government policy. And that if we raise questions about it, it doesn't mean that we don't support Israel. It means, theoretically, that we love Israel and we want Israel to be even better than it is. So if we raise a question about Netanyahu having Otzma Yehudit in his government, if he were to be elected and they were to be accepted as a political party, we have the right to question that, because we shouldn't be sanctioning racism as Israeli policy. And if we think that Israel should reach out and be more supportive of its minorities, then we should have the right to voice that opinion. If we think, as non-Orthodox Jews, that we should have the right to pray at the Kotel, then we have the right to voice our opinion about that. And it doesn't mean that we don't love Israel. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't travel to Israel and visit Israel and spend money in Israel and support Israeli government and buy Israeli bonds. We should definitely do all of that, but at the same time, raising questions about things that values that we hold dear shouldn't mean that we are questioning our loyalty. David.
Question is Israeli government so love Israel. Do the same thing here.
Absolutely, we should do the same thing here. But right, and what I'm saying is the problem is that political discussions have become so heated, and people don't have, for the most part, well-mannered, respectful discussions anymore. Instead, people automatically retreat to a particular position and call the other side names, and that's not right. No matter what we think about the other side, if we call them names, then we should expect to be called names back, and we shouldn't raise hackles about it. If we're calling the names, then we shouldn't argue that we're being called names. But I'm not saying, what I am saying is that we need to get back to a time and a place where we can respect each other, where we can understand that there are a variety of opinions when it comes to support of Israel. And just because we have different ideas about how that support plays out doesn't mean that we're wrong or we're right. Ami and then Dan. Okay.
Indeed, there are racist.
Yes.
But they don't advocate
Okay.
They do not advocate it. What they are saying is
Okay.
and that is the same.
Okay. Let me just stop you right there, Ami. Let me just stop you right there. Where Ami is calling into question my characterization of Otzma Yehudi as racist. Come to shul on Shabbat for the Torah study. We're going to look through the principal statements of Otzma Yehudi, and I'll argue with you. First of all, there's a major problem in using the Bible of a 3,000-year-old document as a basis for government policy today. Number one. Number two, to claim that the Bible is true and therefore the land of Israel belongs to us because the Bible says so. Not so sure that that's a legitimate argument to make today, because there are religions who have their own Bible who could make an alternative claim. And why should we say our voice of God is right and your voice of God is wrong? Okay. And thirdly, it's a matter of semantics when in Hebrew it says in their principles a milchama, a war against our enemies, oivenu, and that we will strongly encourage the migration of non-Jews from our land. Hebrew will be our only language. We'll talk more about it on Sunday. So it's... Oh, I didn't say that. I would probably be the first to say that Palestinian textbooks that call for the right Arab Israelis who are members of Knesset. Let's just submit right Palestinian Arabs who are members of Knesset. I understand completely. Yes, right. They are racist too, and right. So, okay, so it's a fine line between nationalistic and okay. If it's all right, we'll talk more about that on Shabbat. Okay, we will. I trust, I'm not evading it, Ami. It's just that time is a fleeting, and I want to give it the time that it's due. Dan, go ahead. Yes.
So I'm hearing you say.
Right. Yes. Right. Uh-huh. Yes. Yes. Right. Right. Right.
More importantly, my argument is a little bit different.
Uh-huh.
My argument is, again, I'm a nationalist too, science for America. And we consider Israel and the Jewish people to be at war, actually. I'm not trying to sound like we're a military organization, we're not, we're very pragmatic.
Right.
And you'd be surprised for some of our positions.
Uh-huh.
Actually,
Yeah, yeah.
there's no, for example, we're not opposed to negotiating with Palestinian Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
I was told Palestinian Arabs, and the words we use like,
Yes.
there's no such thing as Palestinians like a nationality. They're Arabs who,
Right.
But the point is, my argument is, when we're engaged in a war, it's a rather small scale war
Uh-huh.
now, and people who are on the enemy side, those of you who know about World War II, or I know some of you might have experienced it, I don't know. You know, if you're on our side, you're on our side, if you're on the other side, you're on the other side. And my argument is, given that Israel is engaged in a mortal struggle where Israeli soldiers are dying all the time, I don't have any, my personal argument is anyone who gives aid and comfort to the enemy who's causing those deaths, they're not my friends. And whether they're a Jew or not, I'm sorry. If they're giving aid and comfort to the enemy of the Jewish people, I'm not willing to shake hands.
All right. So I hear you loud and clear, and I can't repeat everything in case people didn't hear this who are watching live or watching a recording of this. But you raise very important points, and it's clear that just an hour-long session on this is not enough time on this, and also just providing general brushstrokes about it is not enough either. And also, there's the whole conversation is not black and white. There's so many gray areas. So when you say that we're at war with the Palestinians, well, so that again, we're not at war with all the Arabs, not the Egyptian Arabs and not the Jordanian Arabs, because we're at peace with their countries, right? So you can't have a blanket statement about all the Arabs. Are we at war with all the Palestinian Arabs? Well, what about those who are citizens of Israel and who are on Israeli Olympic teams and who are in the Knesset and who are, right? I'm just saying that you can't have a blanket statement about all Arabs are our enemies, right? So it's gray. Right, okay. But what we're, so there's a problem, obviously, there's a mortal problem with the Palestinian government, okay? Not just the one in Ramallah, but especially the one in Gaza. Absolutely true. But what do you do about the average citizens who are living under Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and in Gaza? So what should we do about them? And what about Danny Birnbaum, who's the founder of SodaStream, right? So Danny Birnbaum's father is a classmate of my father from rabbinical school. And I knew Danny Birnbaum when he was a little boy. We were both 10 years old. We had a play date together, but I hadn't seen him since he was 10. So that's why I'm not a multimillionaire friend of Danny Birnbaum. But so when he tries, so is it right for BDS to oppose him, who had at the time a factory in the West Bank and had equal workers, Jews and Palestinians working in his factory? Was that so? And then had to move his factory from the West Bank to Dimona, southern Israel, where the Israel's nuclear reactor is, and hired Bedouins and the people protesting about that too. So I'm just saying in short, there's a lot of gray areas here, and it's hard to have one overarching statement that we are this, because you can't support that 100% of the time. We have to understand, no matter what our position is, that maybe it changes a little bit when we learn something more from the other side, when we hear what the other side is saying. So that doesn't mean that our positions dramatically change from right wing to left wing to middle, back and forth. We're wishy-washy. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that no matter what our general position is, what I'm suggesting as a Jewish value is that we need to be open to listen to what the other side has to say. That's all I'm saying. Joe, and then we'll end it. Joe. Yes. Yes. Right. 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 Yes.
Over here.
Uh-huh.
Each other, and here's what really matters is the Palestinians that they need to make in order for Israel to be able to sustain itself. And that's been going on since the 1930s.
Oh, okay.
And I have a theory that because of the grim stalemate, and people grim stalemate by arguing about the nuances and the this and the that and the if not now, BDS.
Yes.
But the main cause of the conflict is that the Palestinians have never accepted a Jewish country there.
So let me just say it this way, because Joe, because I hear from what you're saying some statements that might not be totally fair or very strident in your approach. Okay, and I just don't like to have stridency in conversations. But right.
Why whole discussion?
Yes.
I think Netanyahu, for instance, has gone rogue.
So wait, let me stop you. Let me stop you there. Joe. I'm hearing you, but I just want to say this. One problem with discussions like this is that we're having this discussion in America, where everyone is free to have their own opinions about an area where some people living in the Palestinian territories are not free to have their opinions. Okay? So right, there's an authoritarian government of the Palestinian Authority. So I'm saying, so it's almost like apples and oranges having this. So in other words, people in the West have a certain understanding that this is how we have conversations. How is
considering the Palestinians to be like children? Like they don't have a choice to make.
No,
I'm
I'm just saying that we might have an expectation that if we have a conversation like that, then they can have a conversation like that. So, okay. So, a couple people walked out of the room, and I want to be sensitive to that and be aware of that. And it was important to me to have this conversation, and understanding that there'd be a variety of opinions at play, and people would be upset about hearing some things. But I was willing to risk it, and trying to couch it in a way that we want to be respectful. Why are you shaking your head?
Reaction to the over there, and we deal with it by we avoid the original cause of the
Well, okay. So, but Joe, that wasn't the nature of this session tonight. But Joe, Joe, this wasn't the nature of the session tonight. The nature of the session tonight was about us as American Jews and our loyalty to America when it's called into question by Congressman Omar. Okay, that's how I started this conversation. To get why isn't there peace with the Palestinians? That's not what this conversation is about, and nor would I've had such a conversation because I'm not a military expert. Your wife is the one to have that conversation with. So, I'm pointing this out because I can have a conversation about what I intended to have a conversation about because I'm an American Jew. Okay, I'm not. No, why? I don't mean to if you're understanding this as discounting you and throwing and not treating you nicely, I don't mean to be doing that. I don't mean to be doing that. But I just want to point out for me why there's a difference. I can't talk like Dennis Ross can talk, or your wife can talk about specific security issues and the heart of the heart or the many multi-layered problem that is the Israeli-Palestinian problem. I can't talk about that, nor would I ever talk about that. I don't know enough about it. What I do know is that as an American Jew, how do I express my loyalty to the state of Israel? That's what I want to talk about, and that's what I hope I talked about a little bit tonight. Okay, and how even that conversation is multi-layered because we have a variety of opinions here in the room of organizations that try to represent the Jewish community for its loyalty to Israel, and how others might see that their opinion might not be allowed to be heard, or don't have enough people behind them, like If Not Now or J Street or other alternative voices in the community. So all I wanted to get out of this conversation is that when it comes to loyalty to Israel, it's a multi-layered, what Julian had asked, what the essential question, what does loyalty mean? That it's just as American Jews, it's then dual loyalty, being loyal to Israel and loyal to America. How we express that loyalty and how we voice our complaint or opinion when some things that Israel does we might be in disagreement with, and that it's okay to raise certain issues, and other issues it might not be okay. So I thank you all for helping me understand this and how dangerous it is to have such a conversation.